A reading from the first book of Samuel. During the time young Samuel was minister to the Lord under Eli, a revelation of the Lord was uncommon, and vision infrequent. One day Eli was asleep in his usual place. His eyes had lately grown so weak that he could not see. The lamp of God was not yet extinguished, and Samuel was sleeping in the temple of the Lord, where the ark of God was. The Lord called to Samuel, who answered, "Here I am." Samuel ran to Eli and said, "Here I am, you called me." "I did not call you," Eli said. "Go back to sleep." So he went back to sleep. Again the Lord called Samuel, who rose and went to Eli. "Here I am," he said. "You called me." But Eli answered, "I did not call you, my son. Go back to sleep." At that time, Samuel was not familiar with the Lord, because the Lord had not revealed anything to him as yet. The Lord called Samuel again for the third time. Getting up and going to Eli, he said, "Here I am, you called me." Then Eli understood that the Lord was calling the youth. So Eli said to Samuel, "Go to sleep, and if you are called, reply, 'Speak, Lord, for your servant is listening.'" When Samuel went to sleep in his place, the Lord came and revealed his presence, calling out as before, "Samuel, Samuel." Samuel answered, "Speak, for your servant is listening." Samuel grew up, and the Lord was with him, not permitting any word of his to be without effect. Thus all Israel, from Dan to Beersheba, came to know that Samuel was an accredited prophet of the Lord. Verbum Domini. Here I am, Lord, I come to do your will.
Here I am, Lord, I come to do your will.
I have waited for the Lord, and he stooped toward me and heard my cry. Blessed the man who makes the Lord his trust, who turns not to idolatry, or to those who stray after falsehood.
Here I am, Lord, I come to do your will.
Sacrifice or oblation you wish not, but ears open to obedience you gave me. Burnt offerings or sin offerings you sought not. Then said I, "Behold, I come."
Here I am, Lord, I come to do your will.
In the written scroll it is prescribed for me. To do your will, O my God, is my delight, and your law is within my heart.
Here I am, Lord, I come to do your will.
I announced your justice in the vast assembly. I did not restrain my lips, as you, O Lord, know.
Here I am, Lord, I come to do your will.
Alleluia, alleluia, alleluia. Alleluia, alleluia. My sheep listen to my voice, says the Lord. I know them and they follow me. Alleluia, alleluia, alleluia.
Dominus vobiscum.
Et cum spiritu tuo.
Lectio Sancti Evangelii secundum Marcum.
Gloria tibi, Domine.
On leaving the synagogue, Jesus entered the house of Simon and Andrew with James and John. Simon's mother-in-law lay sick with a fever. They immediately told him about her. He approached, grasped her hand, and helped her up. Then the fever left her, and she waited on them. When it was evening after sunset, they brought to him all who were ill or possessed by demons. The whole town was gathered at the door. He cured many who were sick with various diseases, and he drove out many demons, not permitting them to speak because they knew him. Rising very early before dawn, he left and went off to a deserted place where he prayed. Simon and those who were with him pursued him, and on finding him said, "Everyone is looking for you." He told them, "Let us go on to the nearby villages, that I may preach there also. For this purpose have I come." So he went into their synagogues, preaching and driving out demons throughout the whole of Galilee. Verbum Domini.
Lost tibi Christe.
Faithfulness to daily duty. Balancing the active life with the contemplative life, all the while being faithful to daily duty. This is exactly what we are seeing Jesus do in today's gospel. We see the faithfulness to the call of daily duty with Samuel in the first reading as well. And of course, the response for the responsorial psalm is, "Here I am, Lord, I come to do your will." Faithfulness to daily duty. Proverbs 20, verse 6 says, "Many people are said to be merciful, but how often do we find one who is faithful to his duty?" Many people are said to be merciful, but how often do we find one who is faithful to his daily duty? You know, today's gospel has various segments in it, we could say. First of all, we are told that upon leaving the synagogue, the church house, the physical church building, the synagogue where he had been preaching and teaching, Jesus then goes into a private home, that of the home of Simon Peter's mother-in-law, where she is lying ill with a fever. So then he cures her in a private home after leaving the synagogue. Then, after he leaves that home, it says, when it was evening after sunset, they then brought to him all who were ill or possessed by demons. The whole town was gathered at the door, still in the private home. He cured many who were sick with various diseases, and he drove out many demons, not permitting them to speak because they knew him. Then rising very early the next morning, he leaves by himself to a quiet, deserted place to pray. The contemplative life amidst the active life. Then Simon knew that people were still looking for him. This is early the next morning. And upon finding him, Simon says to Jesus, "Everyone is looking for you." And what's Jesus' response to Simon? He told him, "Let us go then on to the nearby villages, that I may preach there also. For this purpose have I come." So then we're told in the last segment of today's gospel that when he gets to those nearby villages, he what? He enters into their synagogues, their church house buildings, preaching and teaching and driving out demons throughout the whole of Galilee, where the gospel began, preaching and teaching in the synagogues. The synagogues, private homes, the surrounding countryside, nearby villages, back into their synagogues, but in the midst of all that, going off by himself to pray. But that one line is very telling. "Let us go on to the nearby villages then, that I may preach there also. For this purpose have I come." Faithful to my duty, in other words. For this purpose have I come. St. Irenaeus, early church father and bishop and doctor of the church, says, "This is the glory of man, to persevere and remain in the service of God." To persevere and remain in the service of God. We see that in the life of St. Thomas More. I've said that in the past, right up to the very moment of his death under the executioner's blade. "I die the king's good and faithful servant, but God's first." But God's first. And again, St. Irenaeus, "This is the glory of man, to persevere and remain in the service of God." Faithfulness to daily duty, and Thomas More did just that as the Chancellor of England. So, do we foster the contemplative amidst the active in our life? Jesus deserted to a quiet place to pray to the Father. Okay. We risk, amidst our active life, of turning to God the Father only when we need something. When things are seemingly going bad, then we turn to Him and remember Him. Kind of like using God as an ATM machine. We go to it when we need it. Do we risk turning God into a mere ATM machine on a bank wall, which we approach only to make a withdrawal when we are truly in need of something? Or do we go to Him faithfully and regularly, even when things are going well? No one has a personal relationship with an ATM machine. They simply approach the machine impersonally on a transaction-by-transaction basis. They're happy it's there. They approach it, but they don't have a personal relationship with it. No one thanks the ATM machine for dispensing money. No one loves the machine for satisfying a request that they just made. Although I have to tell you, one time I was in line at an ATM machine, and the woman in front of me, after she received her funds from it, she gives it a little pat, like a little thank you pat. But God works on a daily bread basis, daily. And He wants us to approach Him daily, we could say, huh? A big component of this daily bread provision is that one's personal relationship with God grow daily in intimacy and trust. And we see this with Jesus today in the gospel. We see it with the calling of Samuel. "Here I am, here I am." Once he realized the call is directly to him, through Eli assisting him with that knowledge. Friendship, huh? To approach God only in time of need would be like a spouse who approaches his or her spousal partner only when the desire for intimacy arises, but avoids them otherwise. This approach is exploiting and self-centered rather than self-giving, ever increasing in love, and constantly present to the other. And God wants us to approach Him daily with that intimacy and trust, and ever increasing love. So, are you subtly allowing the things of the world to displace God as provider in your life, for example? Approaching Him only as an ATM machine when things seemingly take a shift for the worse, or things seemingly take a shift and going in a direction that you don't want them to go? Trust God. Trust Him daily. Talk to Him daily. Detach yourself from the things of this world. Have a healthy and balanced detachment from created goods to persons, places, or things. Have good self-knowledge in this regard. Know your propensities. Know what allures you, and strive for a balanced detachment of persons, places, and things. Love the Lord and put your life into His hands. St. Padre Pio says, "At all times try to conform to the will of God in everything that you do. And after this, have no fear. This conformity to God's will is the surest way to heaven." Padre Pio, one of our own contemporaries. He died only in 1968. At all times, try to conform to the will of God in everything that you do, and have no fear. This conformity to God's will is the surest way to heaven. And how about Blessed Mother Teresa of Calcutta? She says, in the end, holiness is simply doing God's will in your daily life. In the end, holiness is simply doing God's will in your daily life. And we see that will as ever important as part of our daily bread relationship with God. Daily prayer, daily trust, daily Eucharist, if you're able to receive the bread of life. Capital B, capital L. Again, the first reading, Samuel answered, "Speak, Lord, for your servant is listening." Samuel then grew up, and the Lord was with him, not permitting any word of his to be without effect. Thus all Israel from Dan to Beersheba came to know that Samuel was an accredited prophet of the Lord. Here I am, here I am. Balancing the active with the contemplative as Jesus does in today's gospel, and wishing ever to be more present to God, wanting God to be ever more present to us. What a beautiful, short, fervent aspiration prayer. Here I am, Lord. I come to do your will. Just said throughout the day at various times. Many people are said to be merciful, Proverbs 20, verse 6, but how often do we find one who is faithful to his daily duty? Because, see, we can begin to stock up on things that don't involve God directly, or in stocking up on them, we don't see God's role in those things. You stock up your storehouse, You stock up your pantry shelves with groceries, for example. You fill your closets with clothes. You put away into your savings account. We fill our bank accounts with money. By building up stores of clothes and food and savings, we must be perpetually careful that we don't overstep the bounds of prudence and make the storehouse, the pantry shelves, the closet, the bank, our provider rather than God himself. When we rely on our supplies instead of God, that's when we risk using God merely as an ATM machine, approaching him only when we need something. God bless you.